Joe Biden and I, we've got something in common. Welcome to episode 15 of the Wake and Wander podcast. Lead story today, I don't know if you guys saw this, Hunter Biden has been going on a bunch of podcasts, obviously talking a lot of politics, but one thing he said caught my eye as it relates to travel. He was talking about Joe Biden's debate performance, the one that essentially knocked him out of the race when he looked lost. Here's what Hunter Biden had to say about his dad's performance. I'll tell you what, I know exactly what happened in that debate. He flew around the world, basically, and the mileage that he could have flown around the world 3 times. He's 81 years old. He's tired as shit. They give him Ambien to be able to sleep. He gets up on stage and he looks like he's a deer in the headlights. And it feeds into the fucking story that anybody wants to tell, Hunter Biden said on a YouTube show. He later told ABC News that he was not saying his father was taking Ambien immediately before the debate or during, but that he was making a point about his travel schedule and that how Joe Biden had used Ambien during his travel. Heck yeah, me too. Ambien's been my secret weapon for so many years traveling, especially when I lived full-time in Hawaii. Most of the places you travel from Hawaii are an overnight flight, so you're starting every adventure by sleeping on a plane. Absolutely imperative that you get at least a couple hours of good sleep. Here's what Hunter went on to say. He said, I have no idea whether or not he used Ambien while traveling through multiple time zones in the weeks leading up to the debate. My point was that his debate performance was completely out of character then and now. So he's tried to clean it up a little bit. But essentially, Joe Biden, any president, travels a ton for work. And for me, it's awesome to find out that they're on drugs. It's just funny. As a traveler, I always thought I was a weirdo popping Ambien. Now I know the president does it. That's pretty cool. It also made me reflect back to my first article for CNN in 2021 was about Joe Biden. And it was right when he got elected president during the midst of the pandemic. And I wrote a story called Big Spotlight on Biden's Little Delaware. And it was a travel story about places in Delaware that Joe Biden had been and his home state, what he liked about it. I had gone to high school in Delaware. And my senior prom was at the Hotel DuPont, where some of Biden's political events were held. And there's a specific diner we always used to go to in high school that Joe Biden was famous to go to for his milkshakes. So it was a really cool story. And just leading here with a little fun stuff, Hunter Biden admitting that his father uses Ambien when he travels. Curious what tricks you guys have to fall asleep on airplanes. For me, forever, my method was glass of red wine before the meal. Then I would have the meal because who can resist the meal? The meal cart coming down the aisle on a long flight is essentially like, I think it would be like being in prison and the library cart coming down. It may not be that exciting, but you're going to take something. You need something to pass the time. So I always get the meal. And then after the meal, I would usually do one more glass of red wine while watching a rom-com. Rom-coms were great on flights for me because they're very predictable. It's not too heavy. It's not intense. It doesn't get your blood flowing. And it's just easy watching, and you drink a couple glasses of red wine. And then I would usually fall asleep for a couple hours, hopefully. But the sleep was never that great because you're drinking wine and you just ate. When I moved to Hawaii, I knew I needed to up my game because, as said, every flight you take starts overnight, and it's a long journey to get wherever you go. So if you don't take care of yourself while traveling, you're going to show up pretty destroyed. And for me, in my travel writing assignments, if you go to Europe, for example, and you arrive at 7 a.m., you're starting that day. You're using that day as part of your trip and part of the research you got to do or exploration, whatever. So I needed something. Ultimately, I made the move to Ambien because I remember taking it when I was in college and being pretty impressed with its effectiveness. Now, there are a lot of horror stories out there about Ambien and how people, I think the most common one I hear is how people will get up in the middle of the night and will cook a meal or eat out of their fridge and go back to sleep and not remember it in the morning. I've never had that problem. I actually take the generic form of it. It's called Zolpidem. And it comes in 10 milligram pills, and I break them in half, and I've never had an issue with doing anything weird on a plane. That was originally friends of mine would tease me when they found out I did this, and they would say, oh, Are you waking up and just wandering around the plane, sleepwalking? Another common effect of Ambien, at least when it first came out. I don't know if these problems are that big a deal anymore. I have never had an issue. I feel like if I was getting up in the middle of the flights and doing something weird, somebody would have told me about it. I suppose it's possible I've got up and didn't do something weird and then just sat back down. But I'm not putting on weight, never had a problem. I think it's a good solution for travel, especially to get a couple hours of sleep. It's rare that I'll take it and just be out for 8 hours. Of course, you're going to wake up. You're on a plane. The environment's not great, especially if you're on the aisle. Someone might wake you up. But it allows me to at least get to sleep originally and have the chance to knock off a few hours. The more I've flown, the harder it's been for me to fall asleep for some reason. Maybe it's just because flying is worse than it used to be. I don't know. I'll tell you what, the real value of Ambien, it's nice to take it on the plane. Like I'm saying, it can be useful. The real value comes if you use it the first night you arrive somewhere. So you fly from the mainland to Europe. You go through that day. You're a little tired. But sometimes that night you may have trouble falling asleep, or maybe you fall asleep but wake up right away. Ambien is really useful on that first night in the destination to reset your clock. Or when you're coming home, same thing. Take it that first night. You can take it at the time you want to go to bed, reliably fall asleep, and hopefully, I mean, it's not a perfect system, guys, but hopefully it will just give you that edge where you can start to get on whatever time zone you're trying to adjust to. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a creative artist. So please don't take my word for it. Check with your doctor. That's how I did it. I went to my doctor. I told him I travel a lot. I told him I take a lot of overnight flights. And we talked it through, and they thought it was a good idea. So you talk to yours as well. But I'm curious, how do you guys get to sleep on flights? What's your routine when you're trying to get to sleep on an airplane? Tell me about yours. Will@wakeandwander.com, @wakeandwanderwill. I want to go through a couple mailings real quick. A couple listeners, John in Hawaii, Nicole in Florida, sent me some articles about the airline industry. I told you last episode how certain airlines were charging different prices for different travelers. For example, if you booked as a solo traveler, you were having an upcharge versus two people booking together. Now, Delta has come out with something else. The headline is, Delta moves toward eliminating set prices in favor of artificial intelligence that determines how much you personally will pay for a ticket. Delta has a long-term strategy to boost its profitability by moving away from set fares and towards individualized pricing using artificial intelligence. The pilot program, which uses AI for 3% of fares right now, has so far been, quote, amazingly favorable, the airline said. And I'm assuming they mean it's been favorable for the passengers, but I don't think they would be doing it if it was favorable for the passengers. Let's look at some of the details. By the end of the year, Delta plans for 20% of the airline's ticket prices to be individually determined using artificial intelligence. So we thought it was bad when cookies, remember back in the day when everyone would tell you to clear your browser before you book tickets, because if the cookies showed that you had been looking up a particular flight or had interest in somewhere, they would jack up the price. Well, now AI is going to determine it. How does AI determine what I should pay? Well, clearly they're going to be looking into some metadata or data about my IP address or my account if I'm logged in to the Delta website. Over time, the goal is to do away with static pricing altogether, the airline explained during an investor day back in November. This is a full re-engineering of how we will price and how we will be pricing in the future. Eventually, quote, we will have a price that's available on that flight on that time to you, the individual. God, if this doesn't give me anxiety. So now, now every time we book a flight, we're going to wonder, if I had just waited 1 hour, if I had just logged in tomorrow. Typically, it's been, if you book far enough in advance, you get the best price. Now we're going to play all these games. The Delta rep compared AI to a super analyst who is, quote, working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and trying to simulate real time what the price point should be. This is terrifying. There's a segment in this article called Hacking Our Brains. While Delta is unusually open about its use of AI, other carriers are likely to follow. Personalized pricing has been an airline goal for the past decade and a half, said one travel industry expert. Delta is the first major airline to speak so publicly about its use of AI pricing, to tout its potential upside at its investor day in the fall, and to offer concrete metrics around its use in its recent earnings call. Privacy advocates noted Delta's development with concern. Quote, they are trying to see into people's heads to see how much they're willing to pay. That's a big difference. Is it going to read our social media to know that our grandmother died? That's my concern. Where does the limit of the AI go? And how is it accessing your information? If the AI can figure out that my grandma died and I have to go back to Philly for it, and the funeral is on Tuesday, it can charge whatever it wants. It knows I'm going to go. It can certainly tug at my heartstrings. It can make it $100, $200 more, knowing that I'm most likely going to purchase it because I got to go back. But that's not information it should know. A senator from Arizona called Delta's practice predatory pricing and said, I won't let them get away with this. Yeah, we'll see about that. A Delta spokesperson told Fortune the airline has zero tolerance for discrimination. Our fares are publicly filed and based solely on trip-related factors like advanced purchase and cabin class, and we maintain strict safeguards to ensure compliance with federal law. Spokesperson did not immediately answer follow-up questions on what the safeguards were. The article notes that airlines have long offered different prices to different people, even for the same route, based on factors like how travelers book, or directly or via a comparison shopping site or travel agent, or how far in advance they shop. The use of AI is expected to supercharge this. The price you see is the price the algorithm thinks you'll accept, not a universal rate. This is something to watch for sure. Nicole, thank you for sending that. Super interesting. I'm going to post it in the show notes. We are entering a new era, ladies and gentlemen, on these prices. And I'm just going to take a guess here that we as consumers and purchasers are not exactly going to benefit. Next story comes from John. He sent over a story about Ryanair, who confirmed recently that it incentivizes its agents to charge for oversized bags. Each agent receives about €1.50 for every bag that they, quote unquote, catch as being overweight. Now, this is not your check bags. So check bags, most airlines have a pretty reasonable weight limit of 50 pounds. If you're a little over when you weigh in, some gate agents will just let you go. You're 51, 52. Others will say, hey, just take a few things out. But when you're checking the bag, the weight limit is 50 pounds. I know some of you are probably heavy packers, but 50 pounds is a reasonable allowance, in my opinion. When it comes to your carry-on bags, this is what we're talking about. Because, again, if you have a checked bag and it's 51 pounds and the gate agent won't let you check it, or they're going to charge you for it, you just pull a few things out. So that's really not the issue. The issue is with people taking now, because they don't want to pay for a checked bag, overly heavy carry-on objects through security and trying to bring them on the plane. Most people don't know that airlines, they have restrictions for how heavy your carry-on bag can be. And that's why this is a big story, because most airlines don't really enforce it. They enforce the size, but not really the weight limit. It's not as much a big deal on like American and United. It's more about size there, but on these budget airlines, they do enforce the weight, or at least try to, because that one influences the size of the bag, but also their pricing schemings are just different. This is how they make money, by getting you to check bag and pay for these extras. For Ryanair, the weight limit is 10 kilograms or 22 pounds in your hand luggage, your carry-on luggage. So what people are doing is, instead of checking the bag, they bring their carry-on luggage that's 30 or 40 pounds. Now, when you go through the gate, if the gate agent pulls you aside and weighs the bag, there's not much you can do. I guess you could pull some stuff out and literally carry it on, but it's a totally different situation, and at this point, you're a little stuck. So I guess Ryanair is motivating its employees to weigh bags, spot them, weigh them, catch them, quote unquote, by giving them this incentive, €1.50 or about $1.75 per bag. Well, I got mixed thoughts on this. For one, of course, I find it annoying. I think I find it more annoying in the context of just airlines overall. I don't know, maybe if we didn't have these AI fare stories, maybe if it wasn't coming out that airlines were trying to manipulate prices, maybe if they hadn't gotten rid of free check bags in general, maybe if the airline experience was better, etc., I would be more than willing to let them off the hook, because I guess it makes sense that you'd want to have a weight limit on the bags. I get that. And you want to incentivize people to follow the rules. That's fine. I get that. There's probably legit reasons to worry about the weight in the cabin and the balance, and also just overhead space for other people, for comfort, etc. I think just in the greater context, we just keep getting these stories about how airlines are trying to squeeze us. Yeah, it's just not a great look. And airlines around the world, we never get a good story. Like, the only good stories we get are a new first class, something that most people are not going to be able to experience. We don't really get improvements for the everyday traveler. Yeah, it's frustrating. The easiest thing here to do is just, when you're in Europe, take the train and pack light, because less is more. Thanks, John, for sending it in. Got time to breeze through a couple more headlines. One interesting one I came across, I don't want to get too far into it now. I think I'm going to try and bring on a pilot to talk about this. But there's some interesting articles coming out now and going back about 10 years investigating the idea on whether Autopilot is actually making flying less safe for the customers, because the pilots are not as well trained as they used to be. They rely on the autopilot for certain things that they used to know how to do. So when problems occur mid-air, the reasoning is that they might not be properly trained to handle these scenarios, because they don't have the manual flying skills that they used to, which is a pretty interesting / terrifying realization. So I'll put an article about this in the show notes. If you're interested, you can check it out. I want to try and find someone to come on the show to talk about this. At the very least, at another episode, we'll look into this idea of autopilot. What do pilots actually do? What does the autopilot do? What are pilots doing up there in the cockpit while we're flying? We'll get into that in another episode. But that was just an interesting headline that's been coming out. We've had a lot of incidents lately. There was another one just last week in Denver where people had to be evacuated from the plane. I just saw another one, I think it was yesterday or the day before, about turbulence injuring passengers during the flight. Again, it's hard to say the frequency of these incidences, whether it's increasing or whether the media reporting of them is just increasing. We'll dive into all this stuff at a later episode, but food for thought in the show notes. Is the autopilot making flying less safe? And final story today, the TSA has teased the end of limits on liquids in your carry-on luggage. Right now, 3.4 ounces or less to take it through TSA security. You can't bring a bottle of water, etc., big shampoos. Recently at a conference, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, she teased that this limit could be coming to an end. The new administration has had several changes already to the TSA. We talked about them in a previous episode. They recently got rid of the requirement for travelers to remove their shoes. They enhanced perks for military members. They also created a dedicated family lane at certain airports to get through TSA. It's an interesting one. See if that would catch on. Well, now they're saying they might do away with the liquid limits. Now, we don't have any details about this, who, what, where, when, why. We're not sure of anything, really. They just they were asked about it, and they teased that could be the next big announcement, because the department is currently reviewing all of TSA's policies, including the liquid policy. Just a heads up on that. We'll wait and see. It's a little scary, these changes, because of the unknown. It's like, okay, those rules were supposedly there for a reason, right? But it's been so long since these rules were reviewed and really taken a look at, and I think we can make TSA security a lot more efficient in general. Touched on this in the last episode for the taking the shoes off. I mean, if we're going through the body scanner and the body scanner can't detect a bomb in the shoe, then what are we doing this for? That we need new technology. There's got to be technology out there that can expedite this. Secretary Noem did say that. She said, hopefully the future of TSA is you just walk up to the TSA checkpoint and the technology is so that you can just walk through, pass through some kind of detector, which would scan you, your bag, and everything, and off you go. I mean, we can put a man on the moon. I think we can get TSA going a little better than this. Interesting if they were to end the limits on liquids, how that would impact things, being able to travel with larger toiletry items, shampoos, soaps, things like this that you would normally have to put in your check bag. You could then carry that onto the plane. You could bring water through security, although I don't really think that's a big deal with the fill-up stations behind security. But you might be able to bring a soda, things like this. We'll see. I'm interested in how that would play out too, because you know for sure that the vendors beyond security, they benefit greatly from people not being able to bring liquids through security. You can bring your empty water bottle and fill it up, but many people don't do that. And plus, people want to have a soda or whatever, or a beer or a wine. If there's no limit to liquids, you could just bring a bottle of wine right through security. So all these things are going to factor in. We don't have any more information, but just give you a heads up. There are going to be some more changes coming, it seems. And until we know the details, we obviously can't make an informed opinion, but anything that expedites security and allows us to remain safe is good for me. So we'll see on that. I want to move on now to talk about what happened to me yesterday. I'm out here in Hawaii. I've been here a couple weeks now. And yesterday we had a tsunami warning, and a big one at that. Now, I got to go through this story with you because it is the second time that I've experienced some sort of disaster preparedness, and both times were in Hawaii. Never anywhere else have I experienced this. So yesterday morning begins like any normal morning. I've been out here leading a tour, and yesterday was day 13, the last day of the tour. It's departure day. There's not much planned. Essentially, people are just planning activities for themselves during the day until they fly out at night. Some people hang out at the hotel. Some people rent a car, go cruise around. But their departure flights aren't till late at night, 8, 9 o'clock. So the morning is very casual, typically. People get up slow, have coffee, relax in the breakfast area. And this was the case for us. I was sitting there, guests were coming and going, talking about the trip, reminiscing about the times we'd had, just chatting what everyone's up to next. Like just a really nice end to the tour where everybody's voicing what a good time they had and what they're excited about coming up in their lives. Little did we know how much the day was going to change. Now, normally, after these tours, I fly out late at night too because I'm not full-time in Hawaii anymore. It's very often that when my tours are over, I'm also flying back to the mainland or I'm flying somewhere else to do a travel assignment. However, this trip, I set up back-to-back tours. Started another one just 2 days from now. Instead of flying back late at night, like they were, to go to the mainland or go to somewhere else, I arranged my flight to come from Kauai back to Oahu in the middle of the day. This is literally the first time I've done this, and I can't remember how long, since post-pandemic, because I haven't lived out there full-time. Typically, I've come out for one tour and then left. And maybe I come back a couple weeks later, but I haven't done the back-to-back tours. I typically don't do them because I find them exhausting and that I'm not as good a guide the second trip. But in this case, it's a little different because my second tour is a completely different itinerary and it's a private family as opposed to a group. Anyway, that's not really important to the story. The thing is that I went back to Oahu. I landed in Honolulu, short flight from Kauai to Oahu, about a half hour less, get an Uber from the airport, and go to my place where I'm staying. Literally, I get out of the Uber. I'm not even to the front door yet when my phone starts going off with the alert. That was the first tsunami warning. That was at about 2:45 p.m. local time. It's when we first get news of the tsunami. Now, I should tell you that about a week ago, we also had a tsunami warning, but within the first hour or two of it being issued, the warning, it was canceled. So it's not that uncommon. In fact, tsunamis are pretty common overall. Not like a everyday thing or an every week thing where they're smashing into the island, but warnings, to get a couple warnings a year is not that big a deal. Most of the time, it's canceled beforehand. Hawaii is just so remote. Most people don't realize just how remote it is. Some people think it's just off the coast of California or something, but when you look at the map, you'll see a lot of ocean in between anything. That's why hurricanes and tsunamis, they can hit the islands, but typically when they do, they're not super powerful, and a lot of times they just straight up miss the islands or die out by the time they get here. So when I got the alert yesterday afternoon, okay, we had just been through that a week before. It's happening. Communicate with the guests a little bit. They had also been here when that previous tsunami warning happened. Initially, there wasn't a lot of concern. However, as the reporting started coming in about the initial earthquake that took place by Russia and the wave that it created, it was clear that, at least at that time, that something was going to come to Hawaii. And all the reporting started getting on that there was a tsunami coming that could impact the west coast of the U.S., Alaska, and Hawaii. Over the next couple hours, this just started to gain steam, where the reporting was different than it was a week ago. You could tell the energy into the reporting and into the warnings were different. It didn't take really long to know things were different, because at 2:45-ish, a little before, we got the first warning via phone, and then I was on the south shore of Oahu, and at around 3:25, less than an hour later, the sirens went off, the tsunami warning sirens. And along with that came a new string of text messages and warnings that there was indeed a wave coming to Hawaii, at least one, maybe two, maybe more, and that the first wave would arrive sometime around 7 p.m. that night, about 4 hours from then. And that's when things started to get really eerie, and that is when my guests started to get very concerned. Most of them were held up at a hotel on Kauai, waiting for the flights, passing the day, but that hotel was on the coast. It was in an evacuation zone. Everyone on the tour, it was their first time to Hawaii. So they're not used to this at all. They're just trying to get home. The idea of a tsunami sounds insane to someone that doesn't live in or around the Pacific Ocean, right? Like East Coasters, for example. It's not something you really deal with. My group decided that they were going to go to the airport early. And this was around 5 o'clock. They made this decision, 5:30. And I thought this was a good idea because the airport in Kauai is 150 feet above sea level. It's actually the only airport in Hawaii that's not in a tsunami zone. And if the flights are going to take off, if they're not going to take off, it's just the best place to be. So they go there. Well, as they're arriving at the airport, their flights start to get delayed and then eventually canceled. They made it to the airport, but now they're stuck. Because the airline canceled the flights, they couldn't get a boarding pass, and the TSA security, they couldn't get through. Everything inside the airport was closing down anyway. So now, about an hour before this wave is supposed to hit, my guests are just sitting outside the airport. And if you guys have never been to Kauai, this is not like JFK Airport where there's these big waiting terminals inside. You're essentially under an overhang in the outdoor environment. There's no seating out there. You go from the curb to the check-in counter, and there's not much in between. So I'm starting to get a little worried because this wave's coming, and they're exposed. And they're, of course, getting very scared and upset because they've left the hotel. To go back there is unsafe, especially to be on the road. There's traffic throughout the islands everywhere. It's not safe to travel on the roads. They're stuck. And I feel helpless because this is the first time I've ever left a group. If I was there on the ground, I don't know that my presence would have made a huge difference in terms of gaining access to any particular thing. but at least I have been through this before. I could be there for them. What happens next is the government starts organizing these shelters. So my guests, just about the time the waves are supposed to hit, are loading up on shuttles from the airport and being transferred to a shelter. There's no infrastructure set up necessarily. They're just in a safe place. A lot of them were sitting in an auditorium at a community college, for example. They're waiting, they're following the news, but no wave is arriving. It's 7 o'clock, it's 7:15, it's 7:30, and there's nothing. But still, the tsunami warning remains. Planes aren't going to take off that night. Everyone's still in evacuation mode. There is some validity to this. There are many stories in Hawaii of the first wave of tsunami coming and doing very little damage, but then subsequent waves coming and completely destroying areas. For example, in 1960, there was an earthquake in Chile. It was a 9.5 earthquake, the strongest earthquake ever recorded in history. And the first wave arrived, it was 3 feet tall and did very little damage. The second wave was 9 feet tall, and the third wave was between 14 feet and 35 feet, depending on where you were. 3 feet tall, going up to 35 feet on the third wave. And the third wave was nearly an hour after the first. So even as we got into that time period, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., and the first wave hadn't really done any damage or didn't really show up, we had a little bit of flooding on the east side of Hilo. We had a little bit of water receding on the north shore of Kauai, the island they were on. So there was activity, but certainly not like anything the warnings had made it seem like there was going to be. In fact, you wouldn't be that far off if you just said nothing was happening, nothing life-threatening, no bulldozer coming towards us. But they're not going to lift the tsunami warning because of this history of waves coming in later. And long story short, we know that nothing ended up happening. No significant second or third waves arrived. Nothing ended up happening. But they waste away in the shelter just sitting around for hours. But eventually, the consensus is that there's no longer an imminent threat or a danger to property or coastal areas. They're not going to lift the warning because there still can be tricky stuff with the water. Currents can be off. They don't want to give an all clear that night, especially when it's dark. But the consensus becomes there's not a big wave coming. At this point, we get to a place where people can leave the shelter. People can go somewhere else for the night if they have somewhere to go. All along, my office is doing some back work, and we're trying to figure out where can we put these people, and is there some place that will accept them? Ultimately, the tour company that I work with does find a place, starts contacting the guests and telling them that, don't worry, we've secured rooms for you, and we're going to put you in a hotel so you can get some rest tonight. Just hang tight. You're going to be fine. It might take a couple hours, but we're going to get you in a hotel tonight. Apparently, between the time they had told them about the hotel and later that night, something happened where the hotels decided they weren't going to take, it was a combination of things. The hotels weren't taking people in terms of a shelter situation because of the liability. Most of the hotels are located on the coast anyway, and there was a lot of people stranded competing for these rooms. Long story short, they have to go back to the guests and tell them, actually, you're not getting a room tonight. Instead, you're being transferred from the shelter you're at now to a different shelter where they're going to provide cots for you so you can sleep for the night. So my guests, who were waking up on Kauai that morning, full of life, having experienced a 13-day tour across 4 islands, reminiscing about how lucky we had been with the weather and the group and just the activities. Now here they were, missing their flight home, spending 6, 7, 8 hours in a shelter, waiting for a tsunami that never really came. Were told they were going to get a hotel room, which got their hopes up. And then we're told, sorry about that, and they were transferred to a place where they were provided cots to get through the night. It was the wildest ending to a tour ever. I had mixed feelings because I felt bad that I wasn't with the group. We have this term out here in Hawaii called ohana, right? That's your family, and ohana can mean your actual family, your mom, dad, or it can be, oh yeah, my surfing ohana, my friends that I go surfing with. And when I'm doing these tours, I always set the intention that, okay, as a group, guys, we're in ohana, we're traveling together. So I felt bad for leaving and not being there with them through this final stage. Plus, it was it's a lot of work, trying to go back and forth on all these text messages and keep track of everybody. It was really a crazy experience. And this is the second time in Hawaii where something like this has happened, where we have a threat of impending doom and then a period of reaction and preparation, and then nothing happened. The first time was in 2018. I don't know if you guys remember this. It was definitely in the news. At the time, President Donald Trump was going back and forth with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Twitter, and he was calling him Little Rocket Man and all this stuff, if you remember. And it was right about that time, a few days after that, when it was a Saturday morning. It was 8 a.m. My feet were just hitting the floor, having a slow, nice start to my weekend, when my phone starts going off. I was living with a girlfriend at the time. Her phone starts going off. We start hearing our neighbors around us react. And the alert is incoming nuclear ballistic missile. This is not a drill. Seek shelter immediately. And it was very believable, not only because we got the alert and it said those exact words, but because we had this pre-context of Trump versus Kim Jong-un. It took 36 minutes for them to correct the false announcement or the false warning, the false alarm, that there was actually no nuclear missile coming. But in the meantime, 36 minutes, it's a long time. And there was a crazy string of reactions all across the islands. Some people were putting their kids down into the sewer to try and protect them from the blast. Some people were just accepting their fate, cracking a beer, hanging out. Some people had no idea it was happening because they were sleeping or out on a run or an exercise or meditating. For me, my girlfriend and I were there. We got the alert right away. And it was interesting to see how both of us reacted. For her, she had quite a bit of a panic and a fear. She ended up calling her parents. She ended up saying goodbye to her parents, telling them this bomb was coming, and this was probably the last time they were going to talk. And it was a very emotional, really, I remember it very clearly. It was very moving. Watching that, I decided that that was not my path. I did not want my family to hear that. I didn't want the last conversation I had with my family to be one of panic. So I decided not to reach out to them. But I decided to use that time to take some precautions, expecting some kind of nuclear fallout. I filled every container I could find. Anything that would hold water in the apartment, I filled with water so that if we survived, we'd have maybe some clean drinking water. I got out all my backpacking and outdoor gear and literally suited up like a soldier going off to war, putting on his armor. I put on all my best outdoor clothing, my biggest boots, had my rain gear, had my camping stove. I had all my survival gear ready to rock, all packed up. I tried a little bit to board up some of the windows. We had windows that were lattices, the glass lattice. You can't really close it. It's not airtight. But I did my best. And all that took about 15 minutes. Still had 20 minutes to go. And that's where a lot of the philosophical and the pensiveness came in, of just sitting and waiting. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been in a situation where you believed you were going to die, or at least that there was a strong chance you might die, and then you had a long time to think about it before it happened. It was very bizarre in that way. It wasn't something of immediate danger where you're just reacting to it. It's more of, here's the information, and now sit with it. You don't know when it's going to happen. And through that process, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about how I felt. The biggest thing I remember is just feeling, God, kind of relief. I know it's weird to say. It's not a situation where it was relief because I'm unhappy or because I'm suicidal or depressed or anything. It was kind of a relief of, if this bomb hits, nothing that I worry about right now matters. It had the potential to alter my whole reality. It had the potential to change like what was important to me. Because Friday, I was worried about, okay, I got to get these stories out. When's my next tour? I had a newspaper at the time. When's the next issue of that coming out? I got to do this and that, and the bills, and I got to make money. I just felt that all melt away. When I was told that a nuclear bomb was coming, the only thing that mattered was protecting the people I love around me and trying to help people that I was with. That's all that mattered. The bill didn't matter. That was the relief. Okay, if the bomb comes, like, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to pay the electric bill. It's kind of a weird thought. I mean, I'm not, it's not like, that's what came to me. And it made me realize that maybe I was overcomplicating my life at times. Because when it all came down to it, that felt good to let that go. Now, of course, you say, well, it's easy to let go of your responsibilities, but I just remember that. I remember thinking the only thing I have to focus on right now is what's actually important. Life got so simple. I didn't have to make all these decisions. I didn't have to look at all these cause effect. Well, okay, I work 4 hours and earn this much and then give that much to this person. All that went away. Life got real simple. And I remember that. And then just thinking about what's important to me to leave behind for my family and people who know me. When I imagined dying, I thought, how would people remember me? What do they not know that I'd like them to know? And I remember opening up my email and sending myself a few emails. Some were things I had written previously, and some were just thoughts I was having. And I figured if I were to die in the bomb, that somebody would get into my email and would perhaps find these things, and that would add to the memory of me. So interesting experience, and all this happened in Hawaii. Both of these things happened to me in Hawaii. Yesterday, with the tsunami warning, I didn't really feel like I was going to die, but there was definitely this impending sense of incoming danger and being on the precipice of something, like the front lines of a war. You know, this thunderstorm coming in. It felt like I imagine how people feel as a hurricane approaches. You're up against it. You're up against this force of nature, and you're just waiting to see what it decides. You are helpless. It's a feeling of helplessness. You can't control the tsunami. You can't control the hurricane. You can only ready yourself to avoid it or to confront it. Curious if you've had a near-death experience while traveling or anything similar to what I described where your trip got all messed up, shoot me a note, will@wakeandwander.com, @wakeandwanderwill. Also in the show notes is a story I recently wrote for Forbes. It's about the history of tsunamis in Hawaii, talks about the frequency of how they come. About once every 12 years, we get a tsunami that does do damage to the islands, and talks about how tsunamis behave. They actually travel about 500 miles an hour. Pretty crazy. So check that out on Forbes, the history of tsunamis in Hawaii. That's all for me now. Thank you guys so much for listening to the episode. I'll see you next time.
Yes, now I'm riding the terrain, flying high up once again. Got my crew sitting healthy and my boo living wealthy. Level 99, never settle in my mind. So I pedal and I climb up the pedestal and find almighty weapon. So I calm, lightly step into the castle. Satchel, tackled, wrestled down the corridor where I'm grounded through the floor. Roundhouse into my core, down, out, and through the door. Sword down at my side, I gotta round up and ride. Face boss, break jaws till I take off. Face off, stop and swing my serious strike. This is it, take the title, disappear in the night. To the whole wide world. Got the keys to the kingdom overseas with the wisdom guarantee that my rhythm hit the whole wide world. Slay the boss in the castle when we cross final battle. Then I walk out and travel to the whole wide world. Got the keys to the kingdom overseas with the wisdom guarantee that my rhythm hit the